So are you, I'm curious, so higher than, I'm just.
Good morning. I'm going to call the Minnehaha County Board of Commissioners budget meeting to order and ask that you stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We've got a fairly full house. I appreciate everybody's interest and attendance. Just kind of FYI, this is a budget meeting. It is not a hearing. We don't take any action. Public comment will be limited to the end of the meeting, when we'd love to hear from you. So we will start with outside agency requests. Tom, you want to tee this up?
I sure will. Okay, so Tom Greco, Commission Administrative Officer, just an overview of the agenda. We'll start off with outside agency requests and then progress through other requests that are being put before the Commission. Also highlighting the highway fund, the highway budget overall, and then we'll conclude with a look at the budget forecast and a discussion about opt-out. Just a reminder about where we're at. We're still in the budget meetings phase today, obviously July 1st, but I do want to point out that even though our first budget meeting was last week, you all have essentially been at this for about the last 9 months. Last fall, you had a lot of the folks who are sitting out here today come before the Commission to provide updates on their agencies, what they're doing. And then beginning in January, you started hearing from each one of the departments.
Tom? I was supposed to ask for approval of the agenda, so
No.
can I back up
Yep,
and ask
back
for
up.
approval of our agenda?
So moved.
Motion by Kipley, second by Benninga. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Budget agenda or budget meeting agenda is approved. I'm sorry for the interruption, Tom.
That's all right. And so certainly we're here at our budget meetings. Next key gate is July 15th. That's the deadline to consider any new opt-out, and that's followed by July 22nd, which is the target date for when you file the provisional budget with the auditor. And essentially that means you'll publish the proposed budget, the provisional budget, and then start budget hearings in September. One other note, we will be meeting with the City of Sioux Falls for the 3 joint budget items at the end of August. So the first item that we have up, and I'm just going to put this slide up, just provide a quick overview, and then turn it over, obviously, to you, Chair. And these are the outside agency requests. You can see we have all of the requested agencies listed up here. This top section indicates monies that would be allocated from the general fund and monies that have been allocated from the general fund. So you see the 2026 request over here. The increase above 2025 is on the far right column. All the agencies are listed here. I did want to point out a couple things. Down here, these last several rows, 3 of them have an asterisk next to them. Those organizations do receive a portion of their funding from the Domestic Abuse Fund. So the amounts requested up here are in addition to those domestic abuse funds that we allocate. And then, of course, the ambulance services, there are 3 of them, rural ambulance services, that are broken out down here at the bottom. So overall, this provides an overview. In total, there's a sum total of about $174,000 of requests above and beyond the 2025 budget. So with that, I'm going to take a seat and turn it over to the Commission.
All right. So to the Commission members, we have a number of outside agencies represented here today. This is your opportunity to ask them any questions on their requests, or if you would like, we can go down the list. A good number of outside agencies for a number of years never saw any increases. Last year we did do about $64,000 in increases over the previous years, but for the most part, most of them have not seen any increases in funding. So, Commission members, give you a few minutes to look at it if you want to talk about any particular item or ask questions of any of the outside agencies in attendance. Just as a reminder, this money is statutorily approved, I believe is the right way that we can spend money on these. Is that right? It's part of our 2% of our budget that is the discretionary portion of where we can put money. So it's statutorily approved, but not mandated. So, well, some of it is the domestic abuse fund, spending from that and that type of thing. So a little mix there.
Mr. Chair, I can get the conversation started. I think we made some judicious increases last year that you referred to. I think going into this year, we're looking at a little bit tighter budget situation and budget forecast. I do not want to decrease any of the items from last year, but I would kind of be at a starting point of carrying forward the 2025 budget amount into 2026. I've served on nonprofit boards before, know how some of these dollars get plugged into their baseline budgets year over year, and they count on ongoing support. So again, I don't want to cut in any of these areas at this time, but I think we are kind of at a wait and see approach, especially with some of the actions of the legislature. We kind of just want to be good stewards and kind of, I think discretion is the better part of valor here on this portion of our budget to basically stay level with 2025, at least as a starting point. I'm open to conversation on any line item, but that's my starting point.
All right. Commissioner Benninga?
Yeah, I would agree with what Commissioner Kipley said. If we follow what the legislature thinks that they can do and what is reasonable, it's down two different paths, frankly, because unfortunately what we've been told at this point, and there's no finalization of that is they want to reduce property tax by 50%. And unfortunately, 90% of our budget is statutorily required by the state. So that's a train wreck, to be honest. There needs to be some either reductions of what we're required to do, or they're going to have to find a alternate funding source through some of the requests that I've heard from the legislature. So it's a difficult year to see a lot of increases. I guess I would feel comfortable at this point staying with where we're at with the majority of them, but the new requests are going to be a little more difficult. And to be honest, when we see some of the requests that I know have been affected by United Way, I'm not sure how the county's going to be able to support that.
Commissioner Blyenberg, we'll just go right down the line.
Sure. I would tend to agree, and I would just emphasize that it's disappointing because I think the agencies that have requested increases to funds are valuable partners in the work that we do and the work that we're required to do. So I don't think it necessarily reflects our appreciation to those organizations, but with the difficult environment that we're in right now, I think it's prudent to consider just staying with the 2025 budgeted amounts.
Yes, I'll take the floor next, Mr. Chair. I did get a chance to look through and read all of the requests, and there's a lot of great organizations here that do a lot of good work in the community. And though I do generally agree with my colleagues, that we should probably keep the funding the same as last year. Although I am open to a conversation about the ambulance services requests. We've got Del Rapids, Garrettson, and Humboldt. I don't know if we have any representation from those
Yes, we do.
services. I don't know if you maybe give us a little presentation or speak to some of the needs of the emergency services.
I'm going to kind of limit you to not a full presentation, but maybe address the increase from last year, or at least justify it to us. Because last year you were the ambulance services, and thank you for what you do, but you were one of those that received considerably more funding than the previous years. So, please.
I'm Curtis Nelson. I'm the director of Garrettson Ambulance. Brian Sittig here with Del Rapids Ambulance. So, yeah, we've got kind of an up and down history with county funding. We started out at a certain level 20 years ago, almost 20 years ago. We saw that budget get cut for many years, stayed level for many years, and then now we're just back up to where we started 20 years ago, which we're very appreciative of, that we've been able to get back up to that level these last couple of years. In the last 20 years, obviously, our costs have significantly increased as well. We've used to be able to run under a mixed paid volunteer model. Has not been successful for some time now. That's where we're reliant on having paid staff to have coverage in the. We have a lot more demands on our service. Our call volumes have increased significantly over the last how many years, and so we're a lot of us are kind of barely hanging on and trying to keep EMS for the county. So.
Yep, I would echo what Curtis said. Again, Ryan Sittig with Del Rapids Ambulance. Our call volume has just exploded. I think beginning of the year we were tracking 700 for the year. We're had a couple months, thankfully, that were lighter in call volume, so we're tracking closer to 600 now. Calls out in just the Del Rapids response area, and so and that does just it's much more just within our county too. Last year we were kind of going outside of our county a little bit, helping neighboring Moody County, especially with their struggles of their service up there, but we've really backed off on those responses. So we're really kind of staying within our county here as well. We're just seeing a big increase in call volume. We just had to replace a bunch of safes in our department for our narcotic tracking and all of that. That was $9,000, right out of the checkbook. So just a lot of little expenses that continue to add up. We have to continue to increase our pay for our staff. It's becoming more difficult to attract people to come and work. Thankfully, we've got some people that are moving into our community that are able to cover call with us. But we need to continue that forward momentum with the service. I think that it's not a secret that ambulance services across this nation are on the brink of a collapse. I don't know if that collapse is going to be 5, 10, 20 years down the road, but we are on the brink of it. We're on the verge of it. This model that we've got now is working for Minnehaha County. I don't know how long it will continue to work and what the forecast will look like in 5 years, 10 years. But there's a need, obviously, in our county for the service. We are super appreciative for your guys' jump last year, and we were a little hesitant to do much of an increase this year. And so we're again extremely happy for what you did last year. We just need to kind of keep moving that budget forward. We have ambulance replacement coming up in Del Rapids that we need to do. Our last truck we bought 10 years ago was $180,000. We're looking at over $300,000 right now for the same ambulance. So we don't know how we're going to even replace a truck down the road. So we're kind of trying to figure out what can we continue to save and put away in our capital expense funds to be able to replace some of this equipment down the road. So thank you.
While you're up here, if I may follow up, where do you primarily get your funding with? Are you contracting with the city of Del Rapids, Garrettson, townships?
Yep.
Are you also charging individuals that use the service?
Yeah, so all of our funding between the county, the city of Del Rapids, the townships, the city of Crooks, Colton, and Baltic all do pitch in, and it's about I don't have numbers in front of me, so I'm going to shoot from the hip and around the 180,000 mark, somewhere around that range. a year, and then we receive money from billing as well. Del Rapids Ambulance also runs its own billing company, and so we do our own billing in-house, plus we bill for other agencies, and that offsets the cost of us doing our billing. We actually bill for Garrettson as well. And that kind of keeps that money local in our county. Instead of Garrettson sending that money off to another county, we're, supporting our own within our county. So we receive some funding from that as well, plus we receive funding from patient billing. That is getting harder and harder and harder by the day. When we're dealing with Medicare replacement plans, you're dealing with medical necessity, you're dealing with Medicare, Medicaid. We have received some increases in Medicaid funding, which is helpful through South Dakota, but Medicare is still obviously very lacking. And so, you're constantly fighting the people with no insurance, which unfortunately we're still going to, it's unfortunate that they don't have insurance, but we're still going to provide those people care. And so we do that regardless of whether they have the ability to pay their bill or not. So does that answer your question?
Oh, absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yep.
What, if you don't mind, what are your total annual operating capital budgets? Just give us an idea where you're at.
I wish I had the exact number with me today. That would have been a great thing to bring with this morning, but I was running out of the house before work here. So our budget is around $300,000 operating budget. Whatever we don't spend in the year goes into our capital fund. Our capital fund is sitting around, for Del Rapids specifically, is sitting around shy of 200,000 right now is what we have for outlay. But that includes, any major expenses outside of a truck that we need. A stretcher is $15,000, probably even a little bit more nowadays. You need to replace a cardiac monitor, you're looking at about $40,000. So just the equipment expense and all of this stuff just keeps going up. And we're gonna be good stewards as well and maintain our equipment in good working order. We try to make sure that we're not just buying the newest, nicest thing just to buy it. Let's use what we've got and make it work.
What about Garrettson?
We're a little bit less than Del Rapids, but probably similar. So we're thinking, again, I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but probably a little over 200,000 annual budget. And then like Del's, we do, we'll put away what we can at the end of the year. We try to replace our truck every 10 years. We only have one truck, so we don't have a backup. If our truck goes down, we're out of service. So we try to replace it every 10 years. Our current truck is about 4 years old now. We replaced it a few years ago. So we've got probably around 100,000 saved up for the next time we build. So we'll probably in the next 4 or 5 years, we'll be looking at starting the process of replacing our truck as well. So we try to have the money in hand to replace it every 10 years. So we're not having to take out a loan or scramble for additional funding from other agencies. That we try to budget for that throughout the process.
Good.
Do the ambulance services from the different cities, do you work in concert with one another? Say there's a volunteer out sick, a person needs to be picked up. Will you send one department to another jurisdiction? Or I'm assuming you have service areas that you work with.
Mutual aid.
Yeah.
Right?
We do it through mutual aid. So if Garrettson ends up, hey, they don't have their person got sick today and their truck is down, we'll come over and cover their area. We don't necessarily, Curtis is on Del Rapids and Garrettson. We have people that are on Humboldt and Garrettson and on multiple services. So we do share staff in a way, but we do it more so through mutual aid. We do work well, though. I think all together we all get along. We're coming in, Del Rapids will be coming down to help Sioux Falls here with the Rock the Country event. We do some of the stuff at the fairgrounds and things like that as well. So we help each other out frequently. Sioux Falls comes up and helps us when we're in trouble, and we've got multiple patients at a scene or something, and we need more transport. So we do help each other out, not necessarily in the way you're thinking necessarily, but we do have people on multiple agencies.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, as the liaison to the rural ambulances, I've got to know these guys and got to work with them quite a bit over the last couple of years, getting them the increases that they needed to get there, and I appreciate their respect for the process and humility. While they do a great service, they also kind of ask for a relatively small increase, kind of an acknowledgement that they got good increases the last couple of years. But I think where my position on it is, and I'll take a backseat to nobody on supporting you guys financially, I just think this next year is going to be a big strategic year for you. And I think you'll have a better position to make a case for a potential increase next year if it's coupled with certain kind of what we've been just alluding to, synergies or efficiencies across our rural ambulances. Not necessarily consolidation, but some of those ideas need to be on the table. And I guess maybe I'd frame that in the form of a question to ask. I think, Curtis, we've had the conversation about you guys applied for. I don't know if you've gotten the grant, but you've gotten grant to at least study the model of the rural ambulance in this general vicinity and what we could be doing more efficiently. Is that correct? Could you expand upon that a little bit and maybe how it sets you up for this time next year? You might have more dynamic things that we could be investing in that would be a win-win.
Yes, so we applied for, on behalf of the 3 rural ambulance services, Garrettson's lead agency, but we applied for a state regional service designation grant. It was through the Department of Health that they came out last year with a grant opportunity for EMS agencies and affiliated agencies to look at future of EMS and what is that, what could that look like? So we were granted, our grant was accepted. We have not really gotten started with that. Since it was accepted, there's been a lot more regulations that have come down that we weren't really sure. So we're trying to get all that figured out before. So our plan is to use those funds to bring in a consulting agency to kind of look at some different models of what a regional EMS delivery would look like in Minnehaha County and potentially even including surrounding counties. In order to get a consulting agency on board, there's more hoops we have to jump through that we weren't aware of when we applied. So we're a little bit behind where we wanted to be at this time, but we are moving forward with that to look at some outside help to give us some options to think about what that might look like. Commissioner Kipley has been involved in those discussions, and we anticipate and hope that he'll be involved as we work through that process to look at what our future is. As Ryan mentioned, 5-10 years down the road, we're not likely to be able to maintain the current model that we have, just given ongoing costs, given problems with staffing and reimbursements and everything. So we want to take a proactive approach to look at down the road what does a more sustainable model of EMS in the county look like, and then be able to work with the commission, with the towns, with the townships, and try to build something for the future.
Do ambulance districts, or is there such a thing as an ambulance district where you guys are you able to levy if you got a vote? I mean, what's your status?
That is allowed. I believe the county attempted to pass that long time ago, and it failed in popular vote. But that is an option. That is something that it has to be passed in a general ballot to levy tax funds. Yes, there are parts of the state that do take advantage of that. I don't think we've done that we haven't looked at that since the last time it failed. That was 15, 20 years ago, maybe?
Yeah, it's been a while. At least, yes. There was a resistance from the county. Obviously, it didn't include the city of Sioux Falls, and so the county residents just really rejected that idea. And that's an option down the road too. I mean, everything's on the table. So when we start looking at tax districts, that's definitely an option. But it was rejected a while ago.
We have sewage districts, we have road districts, we have water districts, we have, obviously school districts, and it's, when it comes to the ambulances, if, car accident, somebody falls off a roof or collapses, and somebody dials 911, you expect an ambulance to show up. And I know there's counties in this state where that's very difficult to happen. We're not there, and I don't want to get there. But I agree with Commissioner Kipley. Maybe, let's put everything on the table. If people are willing to be taxed for their sewage, you would think that the ambulance thing might be an option too. Appreciate your time, gentlemen. Of the position, I think, of all my colleagues, and that's leaving our outside agencies at a flat level. If we're going to increase one, we're going to have to decrease another at this point. I'm extremely grateful to the work that so many of them do, whether it be Children's Home Society and the work with the Sheriff's Office and law enforcement, the Compass Center and the work with the courts. So many of these things are handled and they're directed through our courts, our law enforcement, and other agencies that you guys do some great work, but as has been pointed out, word on the street is decrease your budget by 10%. Well, I'm not going there, at least not for this. Do we decrease our budget for 10% for our jail? Which 10% do we let out? Do we decrease our budget by 10% for the state's attorney's office and prosecute 10% fewer crimes and 10% less public defenders? I mean, what's that 10% look like? We have a very austere budget and we look at everything. So this is going to be interesting, but I'm in the same position right now. Outside agencies are going to stay flat. So anybody else have any questions or comments? Okay. So we'll move on to personnel requests. Is that right? Okay. Morning, Carrie.
Good morning, Carrie Deaver from Human Resources. As a reminder from our previous budget hearing, you have a few staffing requests of you for this upcoming budget year. Just like the theme has been, most of these are, in fact, all of these are in public safety or justice related areas. Just as a quick recap, you have a request for 2 correctional officers for the jail, which those positions will actually be used at JJC. And they're a partial year request, so wouldn't be hired until the tail end of 2026. In addition, you have a few full year requests. The Public Advocate's Office is asking for 1 attorney, the Public Defender's Office is asking for 3, and the State's Attorney's Office is asking for 2. Other requests in front of you is a conversion of an existing attorney to a senior trial attorney in the Public Advocate Office. And just as a recap, any section below that, grant funded and other positions, is just a recap of items that are in the existing budget. So truly your requests are the top 2 blue items. As you look at those, often we'll give you a sense of what staffing has been or what requests have been in the past. This is a quick overview for you. I know this can be kind of a busy chart, but I'll get requests of, well, how many support staff are there? How many attorneys are there? How many supervisors are there? So we have started tracking the information for each of these 3 offices. The first column is the State's Attorney's Office staffing level by position, and then by leadership, by senior trial attorneys, and with more of the support roles like legal office assistant and paralegal. The second section here is just to give you a sense of how do those offices combined look between public defense related offices, the Public Advocate's Office and the Public Defender, versus the State's Attorney's Office without some of their specialized role for supporting civil functions, for example. But going back to the requests before you, again, just as a quick recap, 8 full-time requests and 1 request to convert a position to a senior trial attorney. I believe our department heads are with us today if you have any questions about those requests.
Okay, thank you, Carrie. Carrie, quick question.
Yes.
The grant-funded position, has that number changed at all? Is it the same?
This area, we did, good news, we did just get some information that this position's been approved. I do need to do some follow-up with that department. It looks like maybe our cost for that has gone up by about maybe 10,000 is our proportion for next year, but we'll do some follow-up and have that finalized for you by the next budget. Okay. And then again, just recap here, these 2 positions, technically the funding is supposed to end in September of 2026, but if it's not funded for some reason at that point, again, or renewed through another source, we will be back before the commission.
Okay. All right. Let's take this one at a time, I think. Unless we have better ideas, I'm open to suggestions. Correctional officer security for JJC, that's with the opening of the new Juvenile Justice Center, and 2 people are requested to fill that role. So it is a new position, but it's because of the expansion or the new building at the JJC. Anybody have questions from Jamie, do these people fall under the sheriff's office or under Jamie?
They actually fall under the sheriff's office in the jail. They're providing courtroom security. Basically, they'd be at our front door like they are at the front door of the courthouse, manning the x-ray machine, making sure people coming through are safe and handling any issues that would happen in the courtroom itself. We will be having court out there 5 days a week once this starts, and pretty much all day, those 5 days a week, so.
Okay.
It's scheduled to open in January of '27, but need the early hire so that, because they have to go through the academy and everything like that to be prepared.
So these probably won't be needed to be funded for the full year. They'll probably only be funded for 4 months, maybe?
Probably half the year,
Half the year? Okay.
yes.
Mr. Chair, I think that's reflected in the cost we're seeing
Correct.
here. That's why it's a little bit low, but that's fair to put us on notice that we're approving those, and then in 2027, that will be the full cost.
Correct.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I'd be supportive of this. This is just goes in line with our policy approach to having a modern juvenile justice center and having the staff to run it right and run it safely. So I'm supportive of those two.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Bleinberg?
Thank you. I would also agree with Commissioner Kipley to be supportive, and I just wondered if you could give us an example of what the workflow, why is there 2 needed if there's, if they're checking? Can you just speak to that a little bit?
Well, you're gonna need to make sure that you have coverage for days off, those types of things. There's gonna be people probably patrolling into the courtroom and back, and you always need at least one person at the front door. This is from probably 8 in the morning till 5 o'clock at night, Monday through Friday. And to go back on how we got to this point, there was a study done a few years ago about courthouse safety and JDC's courtroom safety. One of the things that they really pointed out to us is our lack of courtroom security and safety. So we wanted to make sure that we provide the same amount of safety for our courtroom as every other courtroom in the state, in the county.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody have any problem with the 2 positions? Looking for more consensus than anything. If you have an issue with it, now's the time to speak up.
Mr. Chair, I'm going to consider this fairly routine business as we open up the new JDC and the expansion. We're going to need staff, and it's a matter of course, so I'd be supportive of these positions.
All right. I'm going to assume that everybody is then, and we will move on to the more expensive positions. Attorneys aren't cheap, and I think we have about 85 of them that work for the county right now. So just to give you an idea, I think we have one of the largest law firms as far as attorney representation go in the state. So that's a lot of attorneys. First one, a request from the public advocate. Julie, when was the last time you increased your staff?
Good morning, Commissioners. Julie Hofer from the Public Advocate's Office. That's probably, I should have an answer to that, but it's been a few years since we have added anyone to the staff. I know it's been, we did get a new legal office assistant position that we filled last year, but in terms of attorneys, it's been quite a few years. Yes.
Other questions for Julie?
Just make the comment that the trend is we're trying to insource as many cases as we can to either our public defender office or the public advocate conflicts office. And so we need both to be well-staffed so that cases aren't spilling out into the most expensive way to handle our cases has been the private bar. So either those third level conflicts, or for whatever reason we don't take the case. So I think this is as the new liaison this year to Public Advocate Office, I'm very supportive of this one and then this also dovetails with in our building fund, we've also approved some renovation for additional space, because that'd be the other point of clarification, Julie, is that your staff is pretty much all right on top of each other now. So this goes hand in hand as we're getting you a little bit more space in the adjacent suite next to you and another attorney to fill some of that space.
That would be correct. There's no more room for expansion in the space that we have that's existing right now to add in any sort of position at this point.
Commissioner Bleinberg.
Mr. Chair, thank you. Just thinking holistically at the personnel requests, I think we had budgeted, just kind of put in a number of 750 as our goal. So looking at the total of requests at 856, just trying to be, prudent and look critically at each one. I'm just curious, the position summary chart on the next page was really helpful. And so I was just wondering, Julie, if you could help me understand the need. I remember you giving us a presentation on it, and that was very informative, but it was surprising to me to see the ratio is a little higher than the other offices. And can you just speak to why you would need to promote another attorney?
Sure. Our office does not have a similar position or positions like the Public Defender's Office and State's Attorney's Office does for a chief deputy. So right now, the leadership role is me, and then Mr. Cady is a senior trial attorney. I am asking for this because I work myself pretty much a full caseload. In addition to my administrative duties, there are times that I need additional help for administrative things, attending meetings, various different things. So the attorneys in our office, and one specifically does step up and help me with that, although that attorney does not have that role. That person has been willing to take on the extra duties when I am not available due to court appearances and vice versa. I would also indicate that one thing that I guess that I would emphasize about the office is our office remains pretty steady. We don't have a lot of turnover, and I think that's helpful for the county. I like to have my attorneys here long-term because we all know that turnover costs money, and then you start, training another person. But when you look at all of the administrative duties, in addition to me carrying a full caseload, and especially if you're talking about going to different meetings, supervising interns, we don't have a lot of, we only have 2 attorneys that are relatively new, so we don't have a lot of attorneys that need, hands-on guidance all of the time. But given the fact that I don't have that deputy, or really, I guess you would say a second-hand person, I'm looking for that position to fill that need.
Thank you. That helps.
Okay.
I feel like I could be open to either direction. I think this is a much less expensive route to go, as you pointed out, than hiring a new attorney.
Right.
And
I would also, not to interrupt, but I would also point out when Ms. Deaver did send out that chart, looking there, if you want to look at like public defender's office has numerous investigators. We don't have those. Those are not included in the support staff. The victim witness assistants, our paralegals do all of that work. So I'm trying to keep our numbers down in terms of who we have to hire. We wear many hats at the public advocate's office. Our paralegals do investigative work. They're social workers. So that's the request. That's why I'm requesting that.
as a prior liaison to the public advocate office, I can definitely attest to the fact that your staff does a lot with a very little. And I'm sure our other offices are similar. I just haven't had the opportunity to be the liaison there. But I do really appreciate the work that you and your staff do with limited space and very full caseloads.
Thank you.
So I guess I'm open to discussion from my colleagues.
Further comments? Commissioner Benega.
I just have one question, Julie. Help me with the total caseload hasn't changed dramatically. since last year, but I'm assuming your categories internally with more significant cases than you've had in the past versus, frankly, the standard cases that you've seen in the past?
Sure, and I don't have exact numbers for you, Commissioner Benega, but traditionally our office does mainly consist of doing felony work, high-level felony work. I would say that's the misdemeanors are secondary to that. And I think I've mentioned this in my presentation, but we also have an increase in juvenile work, which takes an attorney, or will be taking an attorney away from the office for a significant period of time, going to the new JJC. And that attorney is also trying to juggle all of the appeal work that we thought some of it would be taken over by the appeals office that started. But most of our appeals are staying with us at this point in time.
I appreciate that. If you could, I think it would be helpful for me anyhow to get maybe the changes in the caseload versus the category kind of information so I can dissect it a little bit.
I can get that to you.
Rising?
Suppose I'll chime in. I think it's a sensible request. The reality is the county's growing, and in turn crime and the complexity of those crimes. As Commissioner Kipley alluded to earlier, we're spending millions of dollars on outside counsel in the private sector. And as I've been thinking about this, hiring on an additional attorney in this capacity would save the county money long term, keeping that work in-house. So.
Right. And we don't turn away any cases at this point due to caseload or anything like that. So kind of roll with the punches and
So
go with it.
we're kind of taking this in two parts. Personally, I don't have a problem with the additional attorney, but when I look at the leadership, and granted it's only $11,000, which is 1/10,000% of our total budget, but it still kind of creates disparity in management compared to other departments with attorneys. So I'm not a real, I'm not in favor of the pay grade to a request to a senior trial attorney, but I am okay with the additional attorney, and we can probably have that other conversation down the road in the future, but that's kind of where I'm at right now. I'm not too sure. I heard kind of consensus that the attorney's okay, but I didn't know if I heard much about the conversion to the senior trial attorney.
Mr. Chair, yeah, I think it might be a little bit of apples and oranges, and I think Julie was trying to make that comparison just in the sense of the PDO is a much more robust structure and kind of the functional equivalent or counterpart to the state's attorney's office, whereas the public advocate office is this conflicts office that's going to do things at a smaller scale. And so Julie was kind of alluding to, you have a department head for each public defender office and public advocate office, but you don't have the same chief deputy, like all the layers. And so I think she's just trying to set up to have, instead of, it'd be one thing if she was advocating for a chief deputy and trying to completely duplicate the public defender office structure while at a much smaller scale. But if she's just trying to have two senior trial attorneys, is that, you have one right now, Mark is one.
Yes.
And he covers kind of appellate work and juvenile. Then to have another point person, senior trial attorney, I can see the administrative thought that would go into that, but maybe we just need to see that kind of visually displayed, like two org charts side by side, and that's something maybe Julie and Carrie could help us with. But I think there is some administrative thought to it. It also gives pathways to promote within the office and to see yourself going up to one of those senior levels. If you just top out, and if you're Mark's in that job right now, and if he's not leaving, I have no progression to ever become a senior trial attorney, and I just stall out as in that office. So I think there's a couple reasons for it, but I think we could dive deeper into that separately, but I guess I'm supportive of both of these requests and
Thank you.
at this point.
Other thoughts on the increase or the raise, basically, to senior trial attorney? I'm the only one in opposition.
I'm going to post something on the next line if that helps you feel better.
Sure. Okay, well, it sounds like,
Yeah, Commissioner Carsey, I can see where you're coming from on this, and I would like to think a little bit more about this and maybe see some charts and have some further discussion. I am in favor of the additional attorney. Given your comments, I am leaning towards having some more questions about the
okay.
increase.
So Julie, if you would provide an org chart to the commissioners so that at our next budget meeting, we can probably have a more in-depth discussion about this.
I can do that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Deputy Public Defender, we have a request for 3 new attorneys. Commissioner Kipley, you wanted to tee this up?
Yeah, so I had a good email conversation with Tracy, and I'm sure we'll invite her up to talk about her office as well. This was one where I would like to downgrade this from 3 to 2. A couple reasons there. I think that would get us within our $750,000 goal for new positions, so we kind of meet our budget parameters on some things we kind of talk about year over year and bake into our 5-year forecast to stay on track. So that would achieve that budgetary goal. I would also just point out, normally we kind of pair the public defender office and the state's attorney's office and look for equity between those. We talked about that in the next chart on our presentation here, looking for that overall. But then year over year, I think it'd be good to match that. So if the state's attorney's office is adding 2 deputy state's attorneys, I think it's fair to add 2 deputy public defenders. Also, I just don't know that it's the right time and place to try to get too creative, but I think we are open to new ideas from both Julie and Tracy on the defense standpoint, and Brown County is starting their own public defender office. Lincoln County is looking for creative solutions on public defense. The new state level indigent Legal Defense Commission is looking for other creative ways, mainly on appellate work. So there's a lot of creativity in this world, and I think through potential overhire authority or other creative solutions like creating carving out another separate conflicts office to keep more in-house rather than going to the private bar. But I think we can tackle those from a policy perspective over the next year. I think just approving 2 FTEs is the right move for the budgetary standpoint. But that would be my perspective. So still want to grow that office and keep investing in it, but 2 rather than 3 would be my proposal.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. Commissioners, rest of the body, any comments, or if you have questions of Tracy, she's sitting in the wings, ready to go.
I have a question for Tracy, since she's in the room. Because I know we had trouble this year hiring additional attorneys, and as we're looking at new hires next year, where do we kind of sit in terms of staffing and the number of attorneys in the office?
Recruitment and retention was a problem this last year, and we still aren't full staff, but we will be in August. The last few years, because of our spacing issues, we've focused on hiring legal office assistants, paralegals, and last year we focused on hiring investigators. I do worry some because we do need attorneys, and I think the recruitment and retention issue was somewhat because of the workload. And now with getting more judges, we're still going to have the problem with staff. But with the additional space that we're getting, space won't be so much of an issue. I think morale is really good. Because we will be full staff in August. We also have the Pathways program, which will be starting, and we'll have 2 pathways. They'll be deemed certified so they can practice law. So I understand Commissioner Kipley's reasoning and our liaison's reasoning for allowing for 2 instead of the 3. I would just say, if the intent is to create a third office with just the 2, and the intent would be to split our office, that's still taking on additional workload, but really not planning for additional attorneys. And so it's going to be more caseload, but really not planning for the additional staff to take on that additional workload. So that's the only caveat I would bring up, is we're going to need staff if we are going to open this additional office. But again, I understand the reasoning for the 2 instead of the 3 at this point in time.
Yeah, and I think my response to that, Mr. Chair, would just be that I think we probably need to think strategically and separate from the siloed kind of budget process to put kind of a pro forma together of what would the kind of the business model, for lack of a better phrase, look like for a third office. How much would we retain rather than going outside counsel? How much would basically would it pay for itself? And then at that point, we could always consider a budget supplement. Does that need new FTEs to take that? And I think we could consider that at that time as a additional and separate proposal. But just thinking status quo, how we're operating today, I think 2 additional FTEs at least puts you in a position to be successful for 1 more year. And yeah, either we change course mid-year in 2026 with some new policy proposal, or we tackle it in the 27 budget process.
Okay. Other comments?
I would be supportive of the move to 2.
Okay. Commissioner Benega?
I think I would also, I think I would also, I like Mr. Kipley's analogy, and frankly, I'd like to see what the pathway program brings. I think that's maybe an answer to some of the personnel hassles that the legal field is having currently.
All right. Thank you, Tracy. All right. Last one for new hires, new positions, is the Deputy State's Attorney. We have a request again for 2 there, and we had a little bit of the information there. But Daniel, you want to fill us in on any details?
I can talk a little bit about, I guess, the turnover and caseload increase that we had last year. I mean, certainly defense was seeing some of that as well. With regard to the caseload, and we've talked about this, felonies were up about 2%, misdemeanors were up 14%. So you're talking over 1,000 extra misdemeanors last year. We'd had a lot of turnover, and again, some of that is things that we can be proud of. You know, it's fun to see colleagues and coworkers go become judges, go take some of those career positions that they've been working towards. But that always leaves caseload in the office. Unfortunately, they can't take it with them. And so as that was happening, the individuals, hardworking lawyers who were left in the office were absorbing 500-600 new cases. That's not sustainable. We are in a much better spot right now. This commission had given us that flexibility with the overhires. That certainly has been just a lifeboat to my office. We have currently 3 overhires. 2 of them are waiving in, or one's waiving in, so currently licensed in another state. Another one is licensed in another state, is taking a portion of the bar. And then we have a new graduate who's also taking the bar later this month. So there's reason to be hopeful. We're seeing good work from Tracy's office. We're seeing good work from Julie's office. So I appreciate the support for them as well. It's good for the community to have good defense. Certainly you need to have good prosecution as well. So hopefully trends are different. We had record homicide last year. I mean, that is back-breaking when you think about how much time and effort, resources are put into those cases. I had just looked at that. You know, you talk about being split among those offices. I think of the 17 murder cases that were being worked, 7 of them are in the public defender's office, 5 were in OPA, and 5 were private. So you talk about trying to keep some of that stuff in-house. Certainly when there's conflicts, you can't do that. But those are hard cases to defend as well. So as you see that, hopefully we can slow down that trend, but I'm not super optimistic with crime trends right now.
Daniel, if you would kind of talk about the Second Judicial Circuit, which encompasses Minnehaha and Lincoln County. A year and a half ago, they had requested one additional judge, and the state legislature, in their wisdom, gave two. What did that do to your caseloads and your allocating attorneys to cases and that type of thing?
Yeah, I mean, when you look at caseload, right, certainly the judges are presiding over the cases that we're charging out, that we're prosecuting, that Julie and Tracy's offices are defending. What they ultimately did with that, they allocated that extra judge, if you will, to a fifth felony docket. So certainly some of those cases are going over to that judge. So you'd say, well, it's the same amount of cases. But when that opens up an additional courtroom for court, you're going to have a prosecutor sitting there with those cases. You're going to have defense attorneys with that as well. They have, I guess as of today, Judge Hoffman retired, so they're looking to fill that position as well. Those are sought-after positions, and so I'm confident that there are people in the county, other very qualified lawyers who are applying for that spot. I guess selfishly, I hope that it's someone not from my office. That would be nice. I'm sure Julie and Tracy could wish that as well. But when you have the legislature granting positions and funding offices, certainly there's a ripple effect down to the county level. And we will make sure that we're in front of those judges, prosecuting those cases, representing the people of Minnehaha County as well as we can.
I think part of the issue is it was difficult to be in two places at one time. You had your attorneys that were supposed to be in two different courtrooms at one time with the additional
Yeah, absolutely.
judges.
Absolutely.
All right.
How's your office, Dan, doing in terms of space? I know our public defenders and PDO office are
Yes.
struggling.
Yeah. We had the remodel where we took over the entire second floor. That was back in 2023. That was much needed space because we had a lot of lawyers and other staff that were in other places than in the office. So from a supervision and a ability to work well with each other, it's nice to have everyone back in there. We have filled all of the offices that we have. We have a couple of spaces where I think we could build, or maybe not build, but add workstations to. And so I think that we have some area that we can grow into, but we're not flush with extra space.
I would really hate for the county at some point to get to a point where we're not prosecuting crimes, we're not prosecuting them to the extent that we should because of a lack of attorneys and staff. Do you see that as a future problem perhaps if we don't continue hiring, or has it been a problem in the past when there hasn't been properly?
Yeah. Well, we're not there yet. I take prosecution of crime very seriously, obviously. And we have not categorically said we're not taking this type of cases, right? You see that happen in other jurisdictions as they grow, or as you see political philosophy play out. That's not happening here. We're prosecuting the cases that are coming in. I mean, we're exercising our discretion, right? We have the ethical duty to bring cases that we are confident we can get convictions on and prove beyond a reasonable doubt. And so there are times when we get a case, we look at it and there are holes in that, so we're not moving forward on that. But it's not like I've said, oh, I'm not going to prosecute meth cases because I don't have the lawyers. Last year was challenging when we had that turnover. You had a lot of deputies who were getting higher and higher caseloads. That's really hard to do. Again, when you look at growing crime, it's important to make sure that we're staying up to date with that as the caseload gets higher, making sure we have the staff to work those cases, to investigate them, to talk to those victims, but also looking for ways to try and address that recidivism, right? We have an adult diversion program where we're trying to offer individuals chances to go through treatment, trying to avoid some of those convictions in the hopes that we don't see them again, using those tools to attack growing crime. That's important, but No, I appreciate the question. Right now, I feel like the commission has done a nice job of supporting my office, Tracy's and Julie's, and I think we're in an okay spot.
Yeah, I think it's very much a reality, albeit a sad reality, is crime is on the rise, and the nature of those cases is sometimes getting worse. And a fundamental duty of the government and our role as county commissioners is to protect the public and make sure you're properly equipped to pursue justice. So, thank you for what you do.
All right. Any objection to 2? Okay. Thank you, Daniel. That takes us to the end of our personnel. Carrie, you need to wrap it up somehow?
One last item for you. We had talked during the last budget hearing about possible support for putting in a budget holder or placeholder for elected officials, both department heads and the commission. Want to make sure you're supportive of the same philosophy going forward again this year, where we put in maybe about 120 to allow you to consider later possible adjustments to and flexibility for implementing McGrath and making some nominal adjustments in 2026.
Comments on that? My comment on that is, we've been trying to, whether it's the rank and file, the elected officials, department heads, everybody gets the same type of increase, I guess, is what we've been looking at. We don't vote on salaries for elected officials until November and January for the most part, but I'm okay with leaving the item in the budget for now, and that's a discussion down the road.
I would concur.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carrie. My only comment on staffing requests, 7 years ago, I did put together the first financial action network, and one of the outcomes of that, or discoveries of that, was 48% of our budget was going to public defense, whether it be attorneys or deputies or correctional officers. In 7 years, that percent of our budget, 48%, is now 70+%. In the last number of years, I can think of one person being hired. I think that was equalization office a year or 2 ago. That was about the only, maybe there was 1 or 2 others that we added that were non-public defense. All of our new hires seem to be coming in rightfully and justifiably so to the public safety, area of our budget. So lost my train of thought there. I apologize. So when we look at these things, I look at public defense, for example. We probably are budgeting $4 or $5 million between the public advocate, the public defender. South Dakota is the only state that requires the counties to pay for that. Every other state, the state pays for public defense. A great example of, the burden that's placed by the state down to the counties, and then, us trying to fund those things. So talk to your legislators. So my soapbox is over on this part for now. Any other comments? Okay. All right. Moving on then to the highway fund.
Good morning, Susan Beeman with the Auditor's Office. We'll just go through the highway fund at a pretty high level. Our highway superintendent has given you in prior presentations 5-year plans and things like that. So we won't dive deep into the projects here today. Our superintendent is here today and can expand on anything that we don't go into, that I don't cover. So as we put this together, 23 and 24 are actual expenses. So we ended our year for the highway fund for 2024 with just over $11.1 million in our cash reserve. You'll note that there is a decrease here for change in accruals. What that just means is we had roughly $3 million in grant funds that came in January that were applicable to 2024 expenses. That revenue was recorded in 24, but because the cash wasn't in, we decreased that to get to our ending cash balance. When you look into 25 budget, you'll see that $3 million coming in to increase our cash balance. So just to note that. So 25 does include any carryover supplements. As you're aware, highway projects often are multi-year projects. So that's where you'll see a larger year in contracted construction related to carryovers. And that's consistent with prior years as well. Moving into our 26 budget, one thing to note under the revenue area, that 17.1 million does include a $199,000 increase related to the increase in the wheel tax that you recently approved. Obviously, if that would happen to be referred to a vote, we would reevaluate if we should leave that in the budget prior to the public hearing. But at this point, we have increased that revenue. And then related, we have our expenses here, and we're ending with a $6.4 million projected cash balance. So at the end of the year, projecting to be a fairly stable cash balance for our highway fund.
Okay. Questions for Susan on the highway fund? I think what we'll probably end up doing is more discussion will be on the vehicles within the highway fund, which is a part of our next conversation.
Correct. This budget does include the vehicles that you will see on the next slide. So if there were any adjustments to vehicles for final approval, then obviously that would change the numbers to decrease the expenses.
And Mr. Chair, I had just one question that either Jacob or Susan can probably help me out with. Just the 25 versus 26, the total cash projects being 25 million in 25 and only 16 million in 26. Were there a couple major, I might just be forgetting them, Jacob, but can you just refresh my recollection on the major projects we were doing in 25 that's kind of a blip on over prior years?
Yeah, so this is the Jacob Mars Highway Department. This is the third year of our kind of Highway 149 project south of Colton. We had about $4 million in that project. And then we did 3 projects for contracted construction to improve roadways overall, chip seal, microsurfacing, and overlays. We bumped the overlay project up into 25 because we had really good asphalt prices, so that increased that cost. And then we had a couple of bridge projects that we bid in 2 separate years, allowing construction, and the construction for both of them ended up happening in 25. So those costs all just ended up happening in 1 year.
Okay. Yeah, I would just comment, we're not taxing people to sit on reserves, we're taxing them to do projects. So you're doing your job for sure, and I like that we're getting that cash reserve down closer to 6 million. I think we've always talked about maybe 4 million being about as low as we'd want to go, just in case there was an emergency situation of replacing a bridge or something. But I think this is on track. I guess I'd comment to my colleagues, I think I was not here the day we voted on the wheel tax. I think that's going to be something we have to continue to track and along your 5-year plan, and just the spend down for pavement preservation plans. If we want to keep the roads at the quality that they're at now, we might have to reconsider that again next year and going further with the wheel tax. But it's a good start, and it gets us eligible for big grant. It gets us all the points for big grants. So I'm supportive of this. Just had that clarifying question for you. Thanks, Jacob.
Yep.
I could emphasize again, because I've asked the question before, how much of the highway department's budget comes from property taxes?
0.
Thank you.
I just have one comment, Mr. Chair. Not a huge fan of government holding on to taxpayer dollars, but I imagine there's some sort of philosophy or metric as to why we're kind of targeting $6 million and washed out roads, down bridges, emergencies of different kinds. Is $6 million, is that sort of the model or the target, or is there some flexibility there?
Yeah, as Commissioner Kipley was talking about, $3.5 to $4 million is about what it would cost to replace a bridge over the Big Sioux River. We have some over Split Rock Creek that are equal size. There's probably 6 or 7 bridges in the county that are that large and carry a fair amount of traffic. Holly Boulevard going into Brandon is one of them. If we were to lose that bridge, we would have that money on hand to start that project, bid it, get it constructed. So that's kind of the target we're looking for. The other thing that causes our end of year cash reserve to fluctuate quite a bit is the large projects that we do. We can't pay for them all in 1 year, every year. So we have to save up for them and then do large reconstruction projects.
And correct me if I'm incorrect here, but we also have to show that we can fund those projects even to apply for a grant and to receive that money, correct?
Yeah, especially for the Federal Bridge Improvement Program that we applied for last year. There's 3 bridges out there that initially we've been told we were awarded. We haven't signed any documents yet for that contract yet, but we do have to show we are financially stable enough to provide our portion of that grant.
Historically, is it the reserves remained around 6 million, give or take, or is that varied much? Or, and looking to the future, we come back here next year. Are we looking at $6 million to hold in reserves, or?
The 5-year plan that I have, which shows a partial reconstruction in 27, a full reconstruction in 28, 29, and then some other larger grant bridge projects, we're spending down to around $2 million by 2030.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not my intention to hold on to cash. We need to get projects built and get the funding out the door.
Thank you.
Susan, highway money can't be moved to the general fund, but general fund can be moved to the highway money, correct?
Correct. Highway funds are statutorily required to be used for highway, road, and bridge purposes.
So it's not money we can transfer around. Okay.
No, it has to be used within that fund.
I'm going to assume we're done with the highway and move on to vehicle requests. So I'm pretty sure the sheriff doesn't want a faster car, but we do have a few requests from the sheriff's department.
Yeah, Tom Greco, Commission Administrative Officer. So again, just showing you these requests, do want to point out that all of these requests are incorporated into the budgets that you have seen. The 3 items up here, sheriff, jail, equalization, those are all general fund items. And then highway is certainly included within the highway fund that you just heard from. One point I do want to make is that Director Lilla had to step out. I can speak on his behalf if you have any questions about the equalization request. But with that, I'll turn it over to you if you have any questions of the departments. And justification for each of these vehicles is included in your packet.
Thank you, Tom. I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, from the sheriff's department, this is just the routine replacement of vehicles. I don't know how many vehicles you have total, but we try to replace them how often?
Every few years. So yes, Joe Bosman with the Sheriff's Office. The 6 vehicles for the patrol division are adequate enough for us to sustain the quality of the vehicles that we need out there. We need them to start and move and get through the snow and whatnot. If a vehicle is bought brand new and goes straight to our patrol division, after about 3 years, we're at about 140,000 miles on those vehicles already. So we do travel a lot of the roads in Minnehaha County. We want these vehicles to be functional, like I said, for first responder use. After we do evaluate which vehicles are the best candidates to be pulled off of the patrol division, we do repurpose them within the sheriff's office, maybe for an investigator's vehicle, civil papers go serve, jail division, and then we also open up to other county departments as well, Safe Home, JDC, State's Attorney's Office, all those sorts of things. So again, how much miles can we still get on those tires before they finally go to a surplus sale? We do everything we can.
Okay. Questions for anybody from the sheriff's office on their vehicle request? Any opposition? Okay. Jail transport vehicle, is this a replacement, new? What are we doing here?
Good morning, Mike Mattson, Warden of the Jail. This is a replacement vehicle for one of our existing jail fleet vehicles.
How many do you have?
We have 9.
Oof, okay. What type of, we heard from Captain Bosman, what, their rotation is, is it just time? Is it one that's...
We utilize them until they are no longer useful. Typically, if a vehicle's coming offline for us, it's going to surplus because it doesn't serve a function for us anymore. As Captain Bosman said, we do get some of the patrol vehicles that come offline. This last year, we did take 2 of them, and I put 2 new transmissions in both of those vehicles and a new engine in one of them. So there is some expense that comes along with that. And obviously, when we accept those from him, we have to make that determination from a mechanical standpoint. Is it worth the money to restore that vehicle to an operational state? But in this situation, this request is for a new vehicle purchase to replace an old transport vehicle.
Okay, thank you, Warden. Any questions for the Warden? Any opposition? Thank you, Warden.
Thank you.
Equalization, we have an assessor vehicle that I believe is a replacement for one that's probably, what, 17, 18 years old?
It's a 2008 Impala, and so Chris Lilla is requesting that it does be replaced. So the vehicle itself has 80,000 miles on it, but it also has approximately $3,600 in pending repairs. So the trade-in value of the vehicle is just slightly over $2,400. So the cost to repair it certainly the cost benefit is not quite there right now. So the recommendation is to purchase a new vehicle. This would be for assessor use. And just kind of speaking to your previous question, within the county policy, the goal, the target for vehicle replacements generally for non-specialized vehicles is 8 years or 150,000 miles. So in this case, it's exceeded that 8-year mark. So Chris respectfully requests keeping this in his proposed budget.
Okay. Questions, comments? Commissioner Bleinberg?
Did I hear you correctly? It has 80,000 miles?
Yes, 80,500. And it's currently parked. It's inoperable right now.
And how many assessors, how many vehicles do we know?
15.
Of each?
Yes.
Okay, so basically an assessor needs to be
Yes, they need their
out in the
vehicles to
field
get out,
working.
and they use them quite regularly.
Yeah, and it appears here that he's already spent just under $6,000 on the vehicle.
Yes,
in the
there's
past
already
5
been quite,
years.
yes.
And the vehicle being 15 years old, and this is the amount of driving that they do on a regular basis, I think it's a reasonable request. It doesn't seem all that efficient to repair this inoperable vehicle that they currently have.
I guess
To
I
keep
was
it
just-
limping along.
Sorry.
So,
I was surprised that it had so few miles for being so old and being used regularly.
Yeah.
I think the usage of them is the assessor goes out, parks the vehicle and has to.
Does their work.
Yeah, do their work out in the field and then they drive back. I don't know if there's a better way to do that, paying mileage and do we have a policy on that type of thing?
On the mileage or the use?
No, for employee use of their own car for county. So if, we had an assessor that wanted to drive their own vehicle out to get paid for mileage, is that allowed
I would
by our
have to come back.
policies?
I'd have to follow up with you.
Okay.
I think Chris may correct me in the future, but from what I recall from our conversation, this Chevy Impala we're looking at getting replaced was actually given to his department from another department within the county government internally. So that probably explains why there's relatively few miles given its age.
I'd like to open the conversation on, I guess, more, not now, but, do we reimburse mileage? I know if somebody travels to meetings in Minneapolis or Pierre or wherever, that we give them the option. We typically look at a rental card because it's cheaper than paying them mileage. But in the case of, buying magnets for the side of a personal vehicle, and if you use your vehicle to drive from here to Del Rapids and park the vehicle for the day and it sits there while you're doing your work, I don't know if that would be cheaper or not, and maybe it makes no sense at all, and maybe I'm just the only one that thinks this way, but just trying to think outside the box.
We'll take a look at it.
Along those lines, if I could ask, just for future consideration, I drive back and forth in and out of the county daily, and I would be thrilled if I had 80,000 miles on a vehicle that was 15 years old. So I'm just curious, maybe, I know we've discussed before if equalization staff need a vehicle, but if we could maybe get more justification for that, just thinking, it doesn't seem, if it's been in their department that long, I wonder if there's an efficiency that we could have in sharing vehicles.
Okay, we could come back to you with that.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, so we'll leave that one kind of open for now in the balance, leave that one hanging in the balance. Okay, the highway fund, again, no property taxes are expended for the use of equipment in the highway, but we still look at how the money's being spent. So let's talk about these vehicles, Jacob. Anybody want to have questions on any particular vehicle or the philosophy of the highway department on when things are replaced and how it's looked at? What vehicles are used for?
I think, Mr. Chair, our annual tradition is usually you asking if you can drive any of them.
There's no bulldozer on here, so.
We do own a bulldozer.
Yep. What's the bucket truck? Are we replacing a bucket truck? What's the status of that one?
Yeah, Jacob Morris, Highway Department. The bucket truck is mainly used for tree trimming. It's an articulating bucket truck, and for safety purposes, the crew and fleet supervisor want a telescoping or more, it's called a boom truck, I guess, instead of articulating boom. The current model was in the shop last week, and we got a report. It needs quite a bit of work. The man bucket is cracked. The gearbox is leaking. The engine is leaking. The structure of the boom needs resealing around the boom sections. It's just to the point where it's going to start costing us quite a bit of money to maintain. Which number is it?
I'm just, have we ever looked at, if it's used,
it's 20
3
years
times
old.
a week, I mean, I get it, but can we rent that type of equipment for less?
Yeah, we were planning on actually buying a used model is what the plan was.
Okay.
We could look into renting a piece of equipment like that. I do not know what the availability is for bucket trucks. I'm not sure, but we were looking at buying a used model.
What's a new one cost?
I am not sure.
Okay, reasonable, okay.
Do you have a maintenance staff on site that keeps the vehicles in good repair and good shape?
We do. Yep. There's certain pieces of equipment that they're not qualified to work on. This one, for example, went into a hydraulic shop to get checked over last week. Same company that comes out and inspects our crane to make sure that it's safe for use.
You said how old it was, and I interrupted you, I'm sorry.
It's 20 years old.
20 years old, okay.
One of our main, when we're not plowing the snow in the winter, generally we are out trimming trees, cutting down trees in the right of way. So it does see a lot of use for sure in the winter.
Could you just get back to us on what it would cost on an annual basis, your best estimate to rent a vehicle instead of buying one?
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I could ask a question? Thank you. Jacob, could you help me understand the 2025 adjustment was for trucks, trailers, and tractors was 2.2 million, and this year, 2026 requested is under $1 million. What was that due to? Did we purchase something?
Last year, what did we all purchase? So this year we purchased 2 6x6 plow trucks, which are more, our general plow trucks are 4-wheel drive. The ones we're replacing actually for 2025 are 6-wheel drive trucks, quite a bit more expensive. The plan is actually to save the 2 bodies off of the 2026 replacement trucks and put them on the 2025 trucks, just to save some money. I'd have to get back to you with a list of what the other purchases in 25 were.
Okay.
But we, just like we do a 5-year construction plan, we do a 5-year equipment replacement plan as well.
Mm-hmm. I've seen that presentation, and it seems like it's generally a little more flat, like less fluctuation.
It's generally around $1 million is where it's been for the last few years.
Okay.
Yep, and where it is planning to be.
Thank you.
Anybody else want to grill Jacob on vehicle requests? going down the brush chipper, the Landau trailer, the forklift, are these all replacements?
The only one that's not a replacement, well, call it a replacement, is the forklift. We had 3 forklifts at one time. We're down to 2 right now at the main shop in Sioux Falls. We used to have another one in Colton. Currently, we're down to 1 personnel in Colton. With the passing of John Crittenden here a few years ago, just Randy Fodd's reports to Colton, and the equipment we have up there is not safe for what he needs to use it for. So we'd like to put another forklift back up there. We would take an older model from the shop in Sioux Falls, put that in Colton, and then the new one would get a lot more regular use.
Okay.
Is there anything on this wish list that we could forgo until next year, or is this pretty routine and necessary to do your job?
It's routine and necessary to do the job. The only thing I would call a wish list item, I guess, would be the forklift. I don't remember how many years ago we got rid of that model. It must have been 4 or 5 years ago, where the third forklift went away, and it's just needed for safety purposes.
Gotcha.
I would just add that the Freightliner vehicles, I think when I started, were about $200,000, and you got them in the same year. Now they're almost $400,000, and frankly, I think the last delivery we got was a year late.
Yeah, they're getting a little better. We ordered 2025's vehicles right at the end of 2024, and we should see them in August. So, and when we're done with our plow trucks, generally our return on the auction is $30,000 to $40,000. They get used pretty hard on the road, plowing snow, hauling asphalt, hauling gravel.
I just want a little more information on the bucket truck. If there's no opposition to any of the other list, we'll move on. Okay. Thank you, Jacob.
Yep.
Moving on to the big numbers.
Susan Beeman with the Auditor's Office again. We thought it prudent just to run through the currently proposed property tax budget and look at the levies, since we didn't do that at last week's meeting. So just to run through how the slide is prepared, the property tax budget column is the current property tax budget that you saw last week in your proposed budget. The preliminary abstract values of $26.3 billion, those are preliminary, and they will be changing slightly as they go through the state approval process, especially as we get utility values in late August. So just know that we aren't at a point that I can give you final levies yet, but it is a good place to start from an analysis perspective. So those abstract values include not only your growth in new construction values, but also change in market values. So when you factor in the requested budget to the abstract values, you'll see this column here is our 2026 levy estimate. So we are just showing you the 3 funds that are for all property tax owners in Minnehaha County that receive them: general fund, building fund, and our bond redemption fund. Obviously, taxpayers have other areas that they get taxed on property taxes. Schools, cities, townships. If you're in the rural part of Minnehaha County, you could have a fire protection levy or a library levy. So these are just the 3 primary funds for county services that we're showing you today. So for these 3 funds, the current estimate is 2.935 per 1,000 is the levy. Last year was 2.970, so a slight decrease in the levy. And then the question is how does that impact a home? And so what we've done is for 25, we're starting with a $300,000 home. Based upon information that I received from the Equalization Office, the average market increase in Minnehaha County for valuation changes was about 4.8%. So if you increase the $300,000 home in 2025 by 4.8%, that gets you to a $314,400 home in 2026. So using our new levy estimate, that home would see just under a $32 property tax increase for this budget change. So I'll just pause there and see if you have any questions as we move forward.
Seen the numbers. Thanks, Susan.
Okay. So into the next slide, we just wanted to run through where our levies have been over the previous 6 years, as well as now what the proposed preliminary numbers for 2026. You can see that from 2020 all the way through 2026, our levies continue to go down. And that does equate to those changes in market values that increase the values that bring the levies down. I will point out two areas that you did see increases in the levies. 2024, you saw an increase in the bond redemption fund from 23 to 24. That's related to the repayment of the Juvenile Justice Center bonds, so correlate to that timing. As well as over in 2021, you saw an increase there, and that was timing related to the jail bonds for that project back in the late 2018, 2019 timeframe. So again, 2026 is still very preliminary. Will continue to change as we get closer to September.
Mr. Chair, I just throw out a marker as we're looking at different constraints in the equation of, as we consider different opt-outs and whatnot. I think it's a little bit arbitrary. I don't know if there's something magic to it, but it'd be nice if we could keep the levy rate at $3 or less, $3 per thousand. I think that's just a nice communication tool, and it just shows that we're capturing this downward trend and trying to stave off increases. So just as we're plugging in different things to forecasts or equations going forward, I'd be interested in trying to keep that at 3 or less.
I concur. I have a question, Susan. I read something, I think it might have been the Dakota Scout, that since 2021, property taxes have gone up 38%. I don't know if you saw that article. I know that the Minnehaha County property taxes on an individual property haven't gone up 38%.
I've read a lot of things. I don't know if I read that article. I don't have the percentage today in front of me for what we've increased. But again, you know, our increases are tied to CPI and growth. And unless we're considering an opt-out. So there is, and none of us like to talk about opt-outs. I mean, it's something that we all take very serious as part of this. But, you know, there is, what we have seen these last few years is higher growth as well as higher inflation, which that inflation for CPI is capped at 3%. So we have seen those few years where inflation was actually 8.5% and we got capped at 3%. So costs did increase where property taxes were capped at that 3% for inflation. So I certainly can bring forth next meeting the actual increases if you'd like.
I would like to, yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So as we move forward, I just wanted to remind you where we discussed last week. This slide has not changed from last week. This is where we talk about and just evaluate where we're sitting from a cash applied perspective for the general fund. As you're all very well aware, general fund is where we see a lot of our significant pressures. We're increasing costs, and that fund is predominantly funded with property tax revenue as well. So currently, our proposed budget has just under $89 million in revenue. By statute, we have to hold back 5% of appropriations. And then we have a transfer to emergency management to help fund that fund because that's not a self-sustaining fund. And then our 2026 budgeted appropriations currently is just under $95 million. So that factors into a cash applied rate of just under 11.7%.
And
so
that's, that's with no FTEs.
That's with no new FTEs included.
Okay, thank you.
So I want to show you here, as we've put in that forecast level of 750,000, just knowing it's a placeholder number, it's not necessarily a budget, it's just a number to know that what that would look like if you were to approve that. That would increase the cash applied to 11.8 million, which is roughly a 12.5% cash applied. which we've traditionally had a target of around 8%, so that's just roughly over our cash applied target of about 4.2 million. What that would mean is you would have to look at either reducing expenses somehow, potentially considering opt-out or a use of reserves to balance that. And, you know, at this point, our proposal, as far as what we put into this budget, is consider having use of reserves for this year. We had a very strong year last year with some increased revenue and decreased expenses. And so right now, we have not proposed levying new opt-out for 2026 budget, but we would welcome your input on that as we get into the forecast conversation. And that would be levying new opt-out.
Because we have plenty of opt-out capacity at this point that we haven't touched.
Correct. We do have some opt-outs that have been approved, but we have not levied them. This would be increasing the amount of opt-out in our budget. So right now, how this has been prepared, and it's not abnormal. We usually at this point don't have new opt-out in the budget as we want feedback from you as commissioners. We have not included any new opt-out in the proposed budget at this time.
And I know we have a historical target of 8% of using our budget, that cash being applied to the budget. But I know we find that a little bit conservative, and especially if we're sitting on some reserves, we're comfortable going higher than 8%. But maybe we don't want to do 12.48%. So there's probably some number in between with the trade-offs between those different options you talked about, like opt-outs or cuts or cash applied using our reserves. So just wondering, I think we've had a conversation around 9% being maybe a new target that might be more realistic for the medium term.
Yeah, correct. The 8% target, it predates me. I believe it was something that was put back into play as a target back in the 2010s, the mid-2010s. And I think it has been a good, reasonable, conservative target for the county, that if we can keep our cash applied rate at 8%, essentially knowing that part of that cash applied rate is coming from that 5% holdback required by statute that usually we don't see, as well as there's some underspending of budget of a roughly 3%. So that's where that 8% target came into be. I do think a 9% target is probably a little bit closer to maybe reality of where we want to maybe head in the future. When we get into the forecast that we'll see in the next slide, I've really used that 9% just because that also takes into account revenue coming in over target as well. So that's that one piece with that 8% target that maybe we haven't factored in, and that's where I'm thinking that 9% is probably a little bit more a target for the future. I'm still watching to see if that we're ready to move to that officially. But as we get into this, 1% change in a cash applied rate is roughly $1 million.
Susan, maybe you can refresh my memory. I believe it's in statute, we have to have a certain percentage in reserves.
So there's a couple places in statute. One is this 5% holdback of appropriations that we have to take out that is not considered available. Per South Dakota statute, there is no minimum requirement for reserves. There is a maximum for unassigned balance in the general fund, which is 40% of next year's appropriations. From a county perspective, we've kind of set a threshold that we'd like to mean 25% in reserves. That's really 90 days of reserves, which is a pretty reasonable target. As we get into funding from, if we were to go out for a bond issue or things like that, we have been given some insight from Moody's on our last bond issue that if our reserves were to dip significant, especially under that 20% target, that they would see that as an unfavorable trend and mean that we would probably have a downgrade in our rating, meaning borrowing is more expensive. So those are things that we have to balance as we move through the forecast, especially as we go through the next 5 years of maintaining a reserve balance for good business practices, being responsible with the maybe some of the reserves that we built up this last year and spending them down in a careful manner. But also, again, looking forward to the future, knowing that at some point we're going to be bonding again for a project. When that is, I'm not sure yet, but we want to be careful as we balance all those different factors as we go forward.
So it would be accurate to say we're over time spending down our reserves, and at the end of the day, it's going to save taxpayers money.
Correct, and we can maybe, if we're ready, I can move into the forecast, because that's a good segue into
Just
that, unless.
If I could comment real quick before I move on, Commissioner Benninga would remember this best. I think it was his time, but at one point, cash reserves were well under 10%, and it was a scary time budgeting-wise, and very redoing the budget in the middle of the river and making cuts and not funding things that were proved to be funded. So, but at the same point, I'm like Commissioner Heisey and Kipley have indicated, I'm uncomfortable with us sitting on more cash than we need to. And when it comes to cash applied, it's a budget tool, and I don't see, for 1 year, I'm comfortable at 10, 11, 12%. I mean, I'm just to see how it shakes out. But let's look at your long range forecast, because that's where we're going with this.
So when we get onto the slide, this doesn't go back to that low point that you're referring to. Back in, I believe it was 2010, we had a 1.8% unassigned fund balance, which was just under $900,000 in cash reserves. So from those that I've
Make payroll for a week.
correct, from my conversations with people that have were here during that time, it was a very difficult time. So what you saw over that next decade is really just trying to build up a stable level of reserves, because we just did not have an adequate level back 14 years ago into 2010. So that really wasn't that long ago. And so when we look into this forecast and why we want to do long-range planning is none of us want to go back to that point. We know that there are ongoing needs for the county. We also have to be responsible with our taxpayer money. And what you really then saw into 2020 is some increases in cash. And you can definitely see here on the long-range forecast, this blue line is our cash reserves. That includes the unassigned fund balance, as well as the $15.5 million that you assigned last year in December for public safety. So you did see that increase. There's a number of things that went into that we talked about last week. But as we move forward, we know that all of our federal assistance from the COVID era is done. So that has been part of, we've had some funding to help cover some things that maybe we didn't have in the past. But those funds are gone. We also had some one-time anomalies of expense savings as well as some revenue coming in that was not anticipated. So I won't go through that again. But our goal throughout the forecast is to responsibly spend down those reserves to get to where this is at in the forecast by 2031 is to get to, shows us at 30% cash reserves. By the end of 2031. Just to remind you what's included in this forecast is we do have the UC3 expansion in the jail, moving into that vacant floor of the jail. That's projected to be about a $4.5 million expense through 2031 of new expenses. That includes 35 FTEs. Additionally, we did factor in some additional bed rental revenue in there as well. So we've tried to factor that in as well. Additionally, we've included $750,000 of new positions a year, knowing that you'll likely face requests from departments for new positions. Again, that 750 is not a magic number. It's just a placeholder within the forecast. I would love to tell you that this is all 100% accurate, but it is a forecast, so there's a lot of assumptions in there. We did try to factor in the impact of SB 216, which has growth caps, improvement caps on homes for those, for improvements in a home. Now there's a 40% cap on that before it's considered growth. So we've tried to be conservative to factor in that legislation changes. Additionally, as we talk through this, we did factor in layering and opt-out from starting in 27 through 2031. Based upon our Financial Action Network Committee's report from a few years ago, two things came out from that. One, the recommendation to pass smaller opt-outs more frequently, and so that you have capacity to meet needs when they arise, as well as smooth, predictable, smaller opt-outs being layered in as needed so that there is not a huge jump in a taxpayer's tax bill. So this forecast was put together with those assumptions in place. And then additionally, spending this down, the reserves down slowly as we get through the next couple of years to not see a huge spike in opt-out in any one year for a taxpayer. In reality, we will see variations to this. You could see some revenue higher next year. That means that we maybe don't need as much opt-out in 2027. So we'll have to continue to evaluate this as we go forward, but this is really our good planning tool so that you can see maybe where we're headed. Okay. Just to remind you where our opt-outs are at. So the top section here is the building fund. We have historically had 2 opt-outs in the building fund. Just to remind you that $260,000 opt-out for the HHS building, that did expire and will not be in the 26 budget. Since it was tied to a bond repayment, we are not recommending that be replaced. So the debt goes away, the revenue goes away. It's a net impact of 0 on the building fund. As we have, as you're well aware of, the significant portion of our opt-outs is in the general fund, primarily for public safety increases. So currently we have just over $20 million in general fund opt-outs that have been approved. We've levied just over $15.5 million the last few years, and that's currently what's proposed for 2026. That leaves capacity right now just over that 4.6 million mark down here, all within the general fund.
The couple that I'll point out, Mr. Chair, are, I think I've mentioned this once already, is just the, if we're always trying to, the FAN committee wanted us to always look at least 1 year ahead with the, that line item stating the second opt-out down there from 2006 expiring in 2026, that 1.625 million dropping off. And then also I'd notice when we're looking at a 5-year forecast, Susan takes us out to 2031. But I'd also point to 2032 is a fairly large number of $4 million dropping off. And so if we're thinking about layering in opt-outs over the course of 5, maybe even a 6-year forecast, I think we have to keep those 2 in mind. So just planting that seed.
Other comments on opt-outs? Okay.
So as we look at what's actually in the forecast, the graph is a nice, pretty graph, but it's hard to see what's actually the numbers are that's in there. So we wanted to share this slide with you just so that you could see the specific details of what's included in the forecast. So this top section here, up to this first shaded line, is what is levied in the forecast. So for 2026, the 15.503 is what's currently in the forecast as being levied in 2026. Moving into 27, you'll see we'll start with the 15.5 million, but we have that 1,625,000 dropping off because it's expired. So the recommendation, or what's in the forecast, is a $2.9 million opt-out being levied. And so that net impact of that year is around that $1.3 million impact of new levied opt-out. And then as you can see, as you move through the forecast, trying to keep that at a very smooth level of opt-out. You can adjust that as necessary based upon how fast you want to spend on reserves. I mean, you could choose to say, you know what, we're going to delay opt-out as long as you can, but what's going to happen is you could potentially have that really big spike in opt-out in a year, which is what the FAN committee and what previous commissions have indicated. They want to keep things smooth and predictable without huge increases as much as they can. Moving down here into the bottom section, what you'll see is this is opt-out capacity, meaning we have this $4.6 million capacity right now. The forecast shows a consideration of a new opt-out that you would pass but not levy of $1.5 million. And as you move through, this line shows opt-outs that you have levied. You can see that it correlates to the line up above. This would be the opt-out that you would consider passing, again, 1 year in advance of what you need. And as I've indicated, and I'll stress again, these numbers will not be exact as we move forward into the next 5 years. These are forecasted numbers. Actual results are going to vary.
Susan, maybe you could briefly walk us through, for the sake of the public's knowledge, and how we got to this point. Opt-outs, rife with controversy and public backlash, and as an elected official, there's a number of my constituents that reach out to me and make their concerns known on a pretty regular and consistent basis. And how did we get to this point, essentially, as a county, and where we're very reliant upon opt-outs, short-term and long-term?
And that's a good question and a fair question. And I think I'll start back with this slide. And I'll also go back to the time period of 2010 where we had 1.8% cash in reserves, less than $900,000. What you see as you move through, starting in 2012, are more consistent opt-outs. You see a higher increase in public safety needs through the community, through the sheriff's department, through the jail, increasing in needs within the justice area of state's attorney, public defense. We've shared the number multiple times. The public safety and justice number in the general fund for 2026 budget is over 71%. It had been 70%, now it's up to, I believe, 71.4%. And that's before we add these new positions that were approved, or that you've asked to have put into the budget. So those costs are not going down, and those needs continue to increase. And as we get into the forecast, the expansion into UC3, like I said, will add $4.5 million. So those needs are not decreasing, and they're not staying flat. And so that's where previous commissions have made the decision to say, you know what, we need to fund these. They're important to our community. And so they've made that difficult decision to do opt-outs.
Yeah, it's kind of a two-pronged issue. On the one hand, you've got a need to build up reserves to get in a healthy fiscal place. And then secondly, on the other, the fact that the county's growing. I know there's several years between 2010 and now where the county's growing 8, 9, 10, 12% a year, which exceeds the caps of a CPI in growth. Is that accurate to say?
We've not had growth caps. Growth caps will come into play starting in 2027, and that's built into the forecast. The CPI caps have been around since the mid 1990s. I don't know the exact year when they came into play. But if we would have been allowed to charge actual CPI in the property tax formula, for 2026, we would actually have $5.4 million more in revenue to keep up with the expense needs. So as costs increase with inflation, our cap to keep up with inflation was at 3%. So that has created, again, those deltas that we have to balance the needs of how do you meet public safety and justice needs within the county. At the same time, where you have caps and limitations on how you can increase your budgets to meet up with those needs. Because as we've heard from the defense, public defense and state's attorney, those needs are not slowing down. And I would just maybe clarify, the need to grow reserves is maybe not necessarily a desire to grow reserves, but just to get to a stable place so that we can be able to respond to changing market things that happen.
Yeah, not an issue presently, but 15 years ago.
Yes,
it certainly was.
There just was a lot of things that happened. Revenues came in low, some needs changed, and so that's where kind of had a perfect storm, is my understanding back of that difficult time 14 years ago. So with careful planning, we don't want to go back there.
Mr. Chair, I'll give a couple points. A lot of this, of course, goes back to the 1990s Janklow property tax freeze. So a little bit arbitrary, but saying in that point in time, the levy rate has to go here, And to opt out above that for the budget drawing on that levy rate, you'd have to opt out or a local option. And I think some of our legislative friends are under a little bit of misunderstanding when we're using 25% of our budget is opt-outs for general fund.
It's just a little under that for 2026.
But when we look at this forecast or play it backwards, it's optional to implement the tax, but the underlying spending is not optional. So the legislature makes us do certain things, and we want to have public safety. So the expenditures are mandatory in some sense, plus or minus around the edges, but we're opting out in that sense. So 25% of our taxes are in that sense optional. But so when the legislative task force was talking a couple weeks ago, it mentioned, well, some counties, 25% of their revenues are opt-out. That'll get us halfway to our 50% goal of cutting owner-occupied by 50%. So I think there's this misconception of what the opt-out dollars are used for. It's just for our operating fund. This is, again, when we're putting a 5-year forecast together, if we couldn't opt out, we couldn't meet our budget, or we would spend down reserves down to a bad place. So I think basically what I'm getting at is kind of I appreciate if you can go down one slide, Susan, the future opt-outs. I know you're kind of picking your battles and points in different times here. I think it might be time to set out some parameters, some soft parameters, not a Janklow freeze, but some parameters like I've mentioned, like trying to shoot for $3 per 1,000, the 3 mil levy, a 9 to 10% cash applied, and keeping our reserves at the 25%, which is what we're trying to keep our bond rating, because otherwise we'd maybe save on reserves but be paying for it in bond issuance. So if those are some of the parameters, I'd be interested in another forecast where we staircased opt-outs, again, knowing that we've got a time bomb in 2032, looking at working backwards from that of 4 million, we could do 1 million in 26, 1.5 in 27, 2 in 28, 2.5 in 29, 3 in 30, 3.5 in 31, and gets us to 4 in 32. And I think we should set that expectation that there's going to be small but laddered, and this was another theory coming from our fan committee, of laddering in opt-outs and giving that some forecast and sense of certainty to property owners that there is going to be increases, but that it comes with, again, these are not optional expenditures. It's an opt-out of the tax, but that I think we should try to forecast that out for people. And again, back to predictability, I think you've kind of shot for a flat number, and I'm more of a start lower and end higher, because I think that's just the direction of the inflationary pressures of the costs that we're going to be facing in those out years, and then having to replace opt-outs that expire. The $4 million opt-out in 2032 would actually just get us to zero. That would technically be a zero opt-out. So I think maybe if we can play with some of these scenarios and do some scenario planning with, shooting for, are we trying to get to 9% cash applied, or is that too low this year? Do we do something? I think Commissioner Karski said he'd be comfortable with something, closer to 10 or 11% this year. But how do we we need some triangulation of a few different variables in the equation of what are our load stars. Like, we don't want to go over a 3 mil levy. We don't want to deplete our reserves beyond 25%, but we just see some opt-out replacement. Even if nothing else, we need to replace the opt-out expiring in 27 and the one expiring in 32 just to stay level. So that's my theory of the case with opt-outs. And I know we have to get some cards on the table on that, because any opt-out we have to do by July 15th.
Correct. So part of what we will ask you today is just feedback from you as a commission if you want us to bring an opt-out resolution back for the 15th. But I'd also just remind you of part of our conversation from last week's meeting, that if we as a county said we're not going to pass any new opt-out, what would that do to what our forecast looks like? But kept our opt-outs at the $15.5 million as we move forward. With the increase in the forecast, the property tax revenue, the increase in expenses and things like that, we would be down to about 1.8% reserves in 2031. So we would quickly deplete our reserves if we did not have any consideration of opt-out. If you removed all new positions from that forecast, you would get out a couple more years. You'd probably be depleted by like 2034. So as we look at a growing county with increasing public safety needs and justice needs, it's going to be challenging to manage our budget and our needs within our community without some level of consideration of opt-out as we go forward. What that level is as we go forward, will be something that we have to evaluate every year. But currently, under our current forecasts, it would be difficult to not have any new opt-out considered as we move forward.
Okay. So, I think we're probably at the point where July 15th would be our next meeting. My thoughts on the opt-out, the Financial Action Network wasn't government wonks. It was CPAs, CFOs, business owners that took on two different occasions, a very deep dive over several months into county finances, and their recommendation for the opt-outs are so we don't have the 2032 issue where all of a sudden all your opt-out disappears all at once. It's a great strategy to layer your opt-outs moving forward. I personally am in favor of a resolution for discussion on July 15th for the 1.5 million, just because that's what, for the last 2 or 3 years, that's been our strategy, and I don't see any reason to change that at this point. We're not going to use it, but it's a long-term strategy for the commission going forward to have budget tools to meet the expenses that are coming up. Am I missing anything? Okay.
Because we've got there's two separate decisions. There's to do any additional opt-out for capacity, and then do we levy any opt-out? Those are two decisions, and we could say yes to both, no to both, or one or the other.
Correct. I mean, the one that is very time sensitive is the decision to pass a new opt-out, which by statute, we have to do by the 15th.
But
That's
not
just
levy it.
Just for
Correct.
capacity.
We would just be passing it for capacity reasons. We would not be required to levy it. So that has to be done by the 15th. It also is referable. So then they would enter that referral time period at that point. And there's publication requirements that we have to follow by statute. The second question is, which we do have a little bit more time on, is if you wanted to consider levying any of the existing opt-out. As I've indicated, based upon the forecast, we're comfortable with using reserves at this level, based upon where we're at now and with what we know now, to not levy new opt-out in 2026. But that does mean that you're very likely going to have to levy something in 27, even if just to keep whole at that 1.625. Again, contingent on what 25 results are, what 26 looks like, things like that. But it does look very likely that levying something in 27 would be probable.
But we're working on the 26 budget, right?
Correct. So based upon 26 budget, the auditor's office is comfortable with where our reserves at, knowing that 24 results were very strong from both a revenue and expense perspective, using some of those reserves to balance this budget.
And I'm generally inclined to use reserves so we don't have to increase opt-outs and levy those opt-outs. What figure exactly would we be looking at July 15th? Would it be the 1.6 figure, or Commissioner Karski had said 1.5?
Yeah, what I have in the forecast right now is a 1.5 consideration. So where that number comes in on here is this gray line here.
Which would more or less replace the one that's expiring.
Just moving, keeping ahead of opt-out needs. The green line is what's actually levied. So what is in the forecast is the consideration, for your consideration today, is the 1.5 But that could be 1 million, it could be 2 million, based upon what your recommendation is to us to bring back to you.
And just to be clear, in your forecast, you're not expecting us having to levy that opt-out?
No, I mean, right now for 2026, our recommendation is to consider not levying any new opt-out. But knowing where we're headed for 27 and beyond, especially with UC3 expansion coming up, having some capacity there is partially why we're recommending your consideration of passing a new opt-out.
Commissioner Bleinberg?
Thank you. Thinking back to this process last year, I don't expect you to remember this off the top of your head, but I'd be curious what the forecasted future opt-outs slide looked like last year and how we've adjusted it based on the favorable year that we had. I know it was favorable and that was wonderful, but I guess it would give me an idea of how much that has impact. I think it might not mean as much as we would hope.
I would say it's very similar to what you see up here. The two primary factors that have changed is one, SB 216 was not on our horizon a year ago. So our growth numbers were higher in our forecast than where we are today in this forecast. Additionally, UC3 expansion, the timing of that was really in two different chunks of time, where now jail leadership is trying to spread that out and delay costs as long as they can. So they're now recommending a 3-phase-in approach. So that kind of spreads that out longer, so you don't see as much costs on the front end. So those have all been worked in. You essentially get to a similar place at the end with the UC3. It's just the timing of when those dollars hit are different. But it's similar. If you put the two slides next to each other, you'd probably have to get rulers out to see the impact. But I can certainly share that with you and send you a copy of last year's presentation to see.
Thank you. Specifically, I was curious what we were forecasting the opt-out would be for 2026.
Yeah, I don't have that with me, but I can get that for you.
Thank you.
Okay. So opt-out for July 15th, a resolution that can be prepared and modified and passed or passed on, I guess. And some final discussion on, I think there are some small numbers of personnel and vehicles that we probably just wanted to talk about real quick.
All right, so I'll just advance us here. Just last two slides here, as Chair Karski alluded to, our next meeting is scheduled for July 8th. I would recommend you could also probably do that same meeting on the 15th within the commission meeting, but obviously you all will decide that. But whatever the next meeting is, we were intending on doing a review of the budget, certainly to recap the guidance that's been given over these past few meetings, and then revisit that updated means of finance and cash applied. But looking at today, we would just be looking for some guidance, and then I think you can provide some direction on whether or not you want to incorporate that meeting into the 15th or hold a standalone meeting next week on the 8th. So in terms of additional guidance that needs to be provided from the commission, things that are pending from today, there's the one PAO senior attorney request. That's about a $10,000 net change to the budget. The equalization vehicle, specifically, can efficiencies be found in doubling up on vehicles, et cetera? That's about a $25,000 request. And then also taking a look at that highway bucket truck to see if it can be rented. There are some other guidance that you provided, specifics in terms of things you wanted to see, which we'll be able to cover, looking at what our growth in taxes have been, but also taking a dive into what our forecast for opt-outs has been, among other things. So there are not a lot of items. I would suggest to warrant a meeting next Tuesday. I think these things can be incorporated into the meeting on the 15th. And then there is the other question of the opt-out resolution. Again, the budget is one action that the commission will be taking this year, and that would or would not levy additional opt-out. At this time, and what's been presented to you is no recommendation to levy additional opt-out, but the question that just came up at the tail end of the meeting here is whether or not to pass a resolution that would provide future capacity for opt-outs. And that would be a separate and distinct discussion from this follow-on budget discussion on the 15th. So I would just leave it up to you, Chair, for guidance, any additional guidance regarding what you all would like to see, plus when you would like to meet again.
Any opposition to having one meeting on the 15th instead of two separate ones? I think especially if we're going to have a resolution, I think it's appropriate that that be done during a regular meeting. So, and we can sure incorporate, I think it's going to be, what's left we can get through pretty quickly. There's going to be some information sent to us from Public Advocate and so forth and Highway, so we can look at options that we discussed. Did I miss anything, Tom?
No.
Wow, okay. Been a long meeting already. Okay, if we're done here, we have the opportunity for public comment. We give each speaker 5 minutes, up to 30 minutes total. Anybody like to address the commission?
My name is Julianne Perigo-Talkington, and I live in Sioux Falls here in Minnehaha County. I always find this microphone difficult to use. I'm here to talk about the radical drop in the standard of living we're seeing here in this area. Wages are not keeping up with costs. And if you're interested in the data, you can find data to support this assertion in articles on South Dakota Voices. It's a blog. Type in the keywords inflation, standard of living, crime, tax, and school. The articles have links to government and economic analysis sources. Since standard of living is dropping significantly, that means we have, unfortunately, no choice but to cut government spending. Based on your budget, it looks like your cost drivers are crime, that's law enforcement and the judicial component, and social issues. If that is the reason you are spending so much, what are we doing to get to the root cause of these problems? Specifically, are we speaking about prison reentry? Approximately 850 prisoners per year are reentering through Minnehaha and Lincoln counties, mostly through Minnehaha. About 425 will go on to commit another crime. On average, they have 2.5 children. Upwards of 70% will end up in the justice system. That means we could have upward of 1,900 crimes committed each year just from prison reentry. This overloads the public safety and judicial systems. Many of these people are not from our county. Shouldn't other counties be taking part of the crime load? Foreign workers, both legal and illegal, are another issue. Is the amount companies are paying these people enough to cover all the expenses for these workers and their families? Standard housing, food, medical care, transportation. If not, this would be a reason that the social welfare system is overloaded. Is the employee for these workers providing the school system, which I know is not specifically your issue, but it's linked, the extra $7,000 a year that it costs to educate each child that does not speak English and is not at grade level? Also, low income is tied to crime. Are any of these family members of these workers involved in crime? Also, how are we addressing the wage depression in the general population that is caused by these foreign workers, since lower wages impact social and crime issues? Then there appears to be an issue with homeless people from other states locating in our county. Are nonprofits encouraging this relocation to increase their revenues? If so, what is being done to address this issue? Are we incentivizing this behavior by giving nonprofits money? In addition, there appears to be extra overhead in the county. As an example, we're expending about $900,000 for your office. There are 5 of you that are receiving salaries of a total of about $175,000. Where is the rest of the money going? The citizens of Minnehaha County are under a lot of financial pressure, even more well-to-do families, and we are having to make cuts at home to do basic things like pay our mortgages, paint our houses, and pay for our kids' activities. What is the Minnehaha County Commission doing to lighten the tax and fee load so we are not under so much pressure?
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Amanda Feldkamp. I'm here from Sioux Falls, West Sider, Minnehaha County. Also a volunteer board member with the Compass Center here in Sioux Falls. Got some prepared remarks here. We provide trauma-informed care to survivors of sexual and domestic violence, including counseling, advocacy, prevention, education, and support services, all at no cost to the client. Last year, 71% of clients we served were Minnehaha County residents. These are your neighbors, your friends, potentially your own family members. I've personally sat with some of them in the emergency rooms here in Minnehaha County at Sanford and Avera, supporting them if they've gone through some of the darkest moments of their lives. We also serve Lincoln County residents, and Lincoln County currently provides $45,000 in annual funding to the Compass Center for about 14% of our total clients. The support is meaningful and appreciated, but we're concerned that if Minnehaha County support doesn't reflect a much larger share, that Lincoln County leaders may begin to question their continued level of investment. We want to maintain momentum and shared responsibility across both counties so that every survivor has access to the help they need, no matter where they live. Increased support will also help us expand prevention efforts, reaching more youth and families, and potentially reducing long-term demand for county-funded services like law enforcement, prosecution, and emergency response. We had heard about large budget requests for all of those earlier. Stopping violence before it starts is one of the most cost-effective ways to protect our community. Your support also allows us to serve more people in need, retain trauma-trained professionals, leverage grants and private donations. Every public dollar you invest multiplies your impact. We respectfully ask the Commission to consider a funding level that better reflects Minnehaha County's 71% share of our services. Thank you again for your time and your leadership and your service to Minnehaha County. I'm happy to answer any questions should you have any.
Thank you.
Mick Baruth, Sioux Falls, South Dakota. I want to start off by saying, before I forget, that I know that we have a ton of employees with the county, city, all those different levels that perform very necessary functions and do great jobs. But we can't be all things to all people. About 8 years ago, I came across a thing because I was researching it, and it said that if you confiscated 100% of the money in America from every person that makes over $200,000 per year, you still could not cover the current budget of the federal government. We can't be all things to all people. This morning, the first 15, 20 minutes of the meeting proved to me how broken the system is. We had a boatload of people leave this room that were, I'm assuming, that they were representing outside agencies here asking for money from the county, from the taxpayers, and only one of those actually came up and answered any questions. And shockingly, when that group, and I'm saying those are, I'm sure, great people, but it's a problem of the system. When they were asked to divulge what their budget was, what their expenses were, they came to the Minnehaha County budget meeting and couldn't answer the question. That's proof right there of how broken the system is. Imagine that happening in the private sector in a boardroom where all the department heads are sitting around and the owner's sitting at the head of the table, and these people are asking for money for their departments. And they can't divulge what their expenses are, what they need it for. It's just, it never ends. One solution would be if property tax reform can't take place, how about if the nonprofit organizations, the Averas, the Sanfords of the world, start paying some property taxes? Can you imagine how much that would bring in? They pay no income tax and no property tax. And what little TV I watch, it sure seems that these nonprofits have plenty of money to pay for lots of advertising. Not only are they the primary advertisers, but one could quite possibly deduct that they're artificially causing the price of advertising to be higher than should be and making that advertising unaffordable for especially smaller businesses. Everybody in here has heard of Doge. I'm going to give you one example in the state of South Dakota. I grew up by here in South Dakota, so I'm familiar with the state fairgrounds. We used to go every year when I was a kid. I still have people, friends, family in that area. Was speaking to a person who actually works at the fairgrounds. And we can all relate to this because we've all been at family reunions when the conversation comes up. And people talk about how wasteful some of the jobs are in government. But this person said the state fairgrounds employs 50 full-time employees. And the worst part is, in October of last year, they got a call from the state of South Dakota saying they had $650,000 left in their budget that they needed to spend. Commissioner Karski made the comment earlier that the word on the street is that the people want a 10% cut. I don't think 10% is out of line at all. More and more people every day are waking up and demanding that our elected officials figure out ways to cut large amounts of expenses. That will require those elected officials to act like good parents and actually say no more often instead of acting like grandparents who don't have to live full-time with the repercussions of rarely, if ever, saying no. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir.
Gary Meyer. It's unfortunate that the people sitting back here are not allowed to ask questions or say anything through this whole presentation. You all are allowed to make comments and ask questions on every item that came up. So I've got a ton of notes as I'm trying to keep up. I would like to commend you on your outside agency request increase of saying there will be no increase this year. I don't think outside agencies should be part of the taxpayer's budget. After all, South Dakota Canvassing is an outside agency. We didn't come in here asking for money, and we've spent a lot of hours and money securing our elections. I wasn't here last week, unfortunately, but you approved a $200,000 study for somebody to come in and tell you what you already know. You're out of room, you need more space. You're going to pay some company $200,000, which is way more than the outside agency requests, all put together, are even asking for them to come in and give you a report and a bunch of fancy graphs saying you got to find more room to hire more employees. That's ridiculous. You've got plenty of authorized or knowledgeable staff in this building that know the answers to those questions. And when a private company needs to cut costs for their bottom line, one of the things they do is cut salaries. How about a 10% salary decrease for, say, all positions equal to or above the Commissioner Administrative Officer's position? That's a $153,000 a year position, so there's another $15,000 multiplied by how many that could be cut. We're in hard times. The taxpayers are having trouble paying their taxes. And what about the $10,000 raise you gave the new Register of Deeds employee before that person even started? Dean, you have been adamant. Everybody that applies for an elected position knows that salary before they apply or before they go and petition for office. And yet you all five unanimously voted to give that person a $10,000 raise before they even stepped foot in office. And the previous auditor was making close to $50,000 above the base pay. And that auditor was selected by 5 people on this commission. So right there, you add those 3 up, that's already $225,000 that you could cut. And I agree with Jen on this one. I have a 35-year-old vehicle with 215,000 miles, a 20-year-old vehicle with 140,000 miles, and I'm not looking at buying and replacing those vehicles. And yet your assessor's vehicles only had 80,000 miles and it's shot? 80,000 miles? It's only 15 years old. And if I remember right, they were asking for 25,000 on that. So now you can, now we're up to $250,000 savings. And opt-outs. When a company grows, they have more revenue coming in. They make more money. They have more expenses, but they make more money. Minnehaha County is the biggest county in the state. You have a lot of expenses, more expenses than any other county. You have more revenue than any other county. Every person that moves into this county is more taxes. How can our expenses be outgrowing our taxes? You're the biggest county in the state, and yet you're the first one to opt out. And I agree with the previous speaker, nonprofits paying taxes. We got how many huge medical facilities in Sioux Falls that aren't paying taxes? And you look at the buildings they make. Why are you always smirking? You have to really, yeah, you're amused. You have absolutely no respect. You're despicable. So I'll finish up with a question. Dean, you asked the question, how much money from the highway departments comes from tax dollars? And the answer was 0. Where does their money come from?
Property tax dollars. That was my specific question, Gary. You have 25 seconds left.
Oh, they come from property tax?
0 comes from property tax.
So where is their, I don't understand, where does their money come
The
from?
wheel tax.
What?
The wheel tax, licensing fees, etc.
Okay, so it's still a tax. Okay.
Great insight. Thanks. Appreciate your feedback.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Okay, let's not be out of order.
Not be out of order.
Please, Gary.
I mean, I'm the one out of order again? It seems to me that
Gary,
he's the one that starts
I
this.
addressed that to both of you.
Uh-huh. You didn't say it to both of us. You said it to me.
No, I did say it to both of you.
You let him say anything you want.
Mr. Meyer, take your seat.
You even let him accuse the auditor of a crime she didn't commit, and you still have
Mr.
not
Meyer,
said
take your
anything.
seat.
And he sits over there and smirks because he knows he can abuse his power.
Anybody else here for public comment? All right. Look for a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Intense 3.5 hours.